Welcome to this wonderful SWAN webinar titled Demystifying Product Data Templates. This is a very exciting webinar, at least you will see, from experts that have been working with product data templates and in relationship to asset management. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the SWAN organization. So the Smart Water Network Forum, SWAN, has been a leading global hub for smart water and wastewater sector. And I believe we're going on the 11th year. It's a UK-based nonprofit. And really what we do is we bring together key players in the water sector to accelerate the awareness and the adoption of data-driven technologies, digital transformation, in the water sector, both in the water and the wastewater networks globally and worldwide. And while this SWAN organization has been around for about 11 years, about 2.5 years, we started the SWAN Digital Twin Working Group. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so the SWAN Digital Twin Working Group was started 2.5 years ago. The focus of this working group was to really bring people together globally, utility personnel. We're looking at research institution, universities, government, vendor providers, and engineering firms. Bring all of these, smart people that have been working in this industry together to really try to understand what are the challenges in understanding digital twin concepts and digital twin technologies, and then how can we collectively work together to move the industry forward using digital twins. And one of the things that we decided to do as a digital twin working group, we meet constantly through several calls a year. We usually have 1 or 2 large workshops a year. And then we also divided up into sub-working groups that can really focus on specific areas, like the architecture sub-working group, the outcomes and ROI sub-working group. We recently started a digital twin lifecycle working group that focuses on the life cycle of a digital twin from design phase, construction, and into operations. And we realized that we had to start a BIM sub-working group, which one of the speakers today, one of the panelists, Jamie Mills, is the co-lead for. And as we started working in this BIM sub-working group, we realized we were started to work with these process blocks, and process block, a fundamental component of it, are product data templates, and which are really structured data, as you're going to learn about these assets. We realized that there were many people that were asking for more information on product data templates, and it's a new area in the water sector. So we decided to have this webinar, which I'm super excited about. So with that, I want to hand it back over to Shayna. Thank you, Shayna.
Thank you so much, Gigi, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to see such a big crowd and interest in this topic. So I'm really thrilled to welcome some panelists, expert speakers to introduce you to these product data templates. Really, I've seen all the presentations. It's going to be fantastic. So welcome Jamie Mills from BIM4Water will be presenting, followed by Richard Sterland, also part of the BIM4Water group, and then followed by a presentation by Alex Geokis from Strategic Pipeline Alliance. And then we'll get into a really open discussion with Karen Alford from the Environmental Agency, Jonathan Higgins, also from BIM4Water, and Daniel Williams from Welsh Water, really to bring in these utility perspectives. So with that, we have a lot to cover, so I will go ahead and hand it over to Jamie.
Thank you very much, Shayna. Okay, let's get cracking. So my day job is working for Xylem as a global BIM manager. So I've got my feet, or I look after 29 product manufacturers. So in terms of getting data out of back-end systems and presenting it, or traveling it through the supply chain and getting to asset owners, quite close to my heart. But I'm here to just explain and give an overview of what BIM4Water has been doing and why we've got this close partnership with SWAN. So BIM4Water has been around for 8 years, and it was really formed as part of the government mandate for driving BIM, so improving the face of construction But also there's a need to create specific industry focus groups to do that. And you can see there that, you know, the group's mission is to really lead, drive and support organisations to realise value through digital transformation of the water sector. The group is completely free. It's all around facilitating collaboration, so sharing good experiences, working together, working collaboratively, and that's really reflected in the makeup of the group. So it's owner-operators, consultants, contractors, manufacturers, etc. And also now we're seeing regulators and other stakeholders actively getting involved in our activities and showing an interest. So there's an elected steering group. I'm in a chair position at the moment and I'll hand that over next year. So that's a 2-year position. I work alongside a vice chair and we're supported by British Water, which is a non-for-profit organisation. They help us out with web space, etc. Like I say, you know, there's no funding in this. This is all goodwill or perhaps stupidity to drive this forward. Around that, so the elected steering group of 10 people, of which a couple of the speakers today are on that. And then we have a communications engagement group, and then we're working closely, you know, with the people at the coalface, so the task groups. And of course, we're going to be speaking with Richard and Jonathan, who head up the standard libraries group, where data templates take place. But what I wanted to do was just run through very quickly, and I appreciate, and I know Shana, you're going to give me a kick if I've run over time. So I'm going to try and run through 8 task groups very quickly. I know the slides are going to be shared afterwards, and I'd encourage anyone, you know, read a bit further if you want, or check out the web space for the links that are included in this deck. As I said there, so the task groups all have a chair and a vice chair, and they have their own terms of reference, and they're really driving the activity of the industry. So that they're working on different elements, and this is all really structured and managed through our, you know, our 5-year roadmap, essentially moving towards that mission of the, you know, the entire group, and that is driving that digital transformation within the water sector. So here we go. I'm going to try and run through 8 task groups very quickly and not run over time. So I think with any information that we want to collect or digital data to help us make better improved decisions, that's got to start with owner operators. This group was established quite quickly within BIM4Water, and it's a closed space where owner operators can get together and discuss different elements of managing or collecting information through their supply chain on major capital delivery projects or existing assets. So let me just, I did miss one, God. You'll see why we abbreviate this one. So it's Data Quality, Security and Governance Group. And of course, you know, before we start exchanging or building information models of our assets, we really need to get the nuts and bolts in place. So this is all about where is your digital maturity and where are you at the minute? Let's benchmark, and how do we get to a space where we're bringing in good data, it's robust, it's secure, and you know, really opening up an opportunity for open data sharing within across the sector. So the Water Data Task Force, you know, this is maybe an outcome of the government initiative for national digital twins for critical infrastructure, and that's really supporting the guidance and awareness amongst government, UK government and the regulator, to how we would share data across a sector. Back to the nuts and bolts bit, none of this would take off if we didn't really understand the ontology, classification and hierarchy, how we structure and exchange data. And to do this effectively, you know, we need to break down the walls of interoperability, and we need to make things machine readable. And the WICSES group are working very closely with Uniclass 2015, a classification system over here, and we're aligning the tables for products, systems, etc. So they meet the requirements of water industry equipment, systems or processes. Of course, you don't find a sludge scraper in a built vertical building. So there's a need for us to work closely with them to make sure we've got these special classifications, globally unique identifiers. We also partner with Australia in that effort. I'm not going to say too much on this, but I think you can see where I'm going with this. Once you've done the nuts and bolts and the ontology, you've got good data. Now we need to know how to exchange it. And that's really, the fundamental role of the Standard Libraries Group, is to understanding how we can package and exchange data in a standard mechanism. Of course, none of that would happen without people. So we have a huge driver around bringing in the academics and making sure that we've got the right skill sets to make all of this happen. And these guys are doing fantastic work in that space, and already, also looking at diversity and what we can bring to the table from different aspects of the and of course other sectors as well. What skills can we bring in from other sectors? The next event is in November, and I'm sure if you're following us on LinkedIn, you'll see a shout out about that. The delivery part, actually delivering that through construction capital delivery, we need some expertise in that space. And, I like to see this as the greater than 4D, of course, 4D, the element of time. This group explores that. They've done some fantastic guidance document in how you would go to rehearse a capital delivery project. Now they're going to move into the space of looking at cost and, of course, carbon modeling. We've got a case studies group. They've been out capturing some fantastic wins, successes, and perhaps, expressing things that didn't work too well. But, it's a great resource, and I'll challenge anyone to go back through these slides and access that link at the bottom and just have a look at some of these, these good wins. The communications engagement, there's the link there. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. That's where we publish all of our, or most of our good things. And of course, what we're doing here today is sharing what we've learned so far, and being able to pass that on is, surely a good thing. And of course, through publications as well. So that is all. There's a link there to the web page, and there's also an email address, and my email address is at the front of the deck. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to you, Richard. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm just going to start sharing my screen also. Okay, hopefully that's come through to everyone. Hi everyone, my name is Richard Sterling. So I work as Asset Data Team Manager for Anglian Water's Outland Alliance, and within BIM4Water I chair the Standard Libraries Group. Today I'm going to be talking about what we've developed in the form of our standard process for data exchange and our product data templates, or PDTs. So just to start things off, I really want to run a quick poll with you. You might have seen a message I posted in the chat. You can either scan the QR code on this slide, or we can go to the chat and access the link and use the code 77940341. What I want you to do is to answer the question on the slide, which is, what would you call the item shown in the picture on the slide? Now, when you click the link, if you know more than one term for the item shown, by all means, you can enter more than one term, the more the merrier. And what I'm going to do is quickly skip over this poll to show the results that have kind of started to come in. Okay, great. So we've got a few results started to come in already from people. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you should be able to see kind of a word cloud that's being created. The larger words are the more entry you have with that particular word. So people are saying chips, saying fries, potatoes, wedges. Someone said unhealthy, whilst sadly I agree, they do taste so very good. That's brilliant. Thanks ever so much for all the results that people have sent in for that. It was just, I really wanted to get you participating in that to demonstrate a bit of a point. So that's fantastic. The point I was trying to make there is that we all have different terminology for different things. I've generalized on the slides, but for example, the US might call them fries, UK we might call them chips, Belgium and France might call them frites, and each of those countries might use different terms to describe the food's characteristics. Someone in the US, for example, might describe the crunchiness of the fries, whereas someone in the UK might say crispiness. For other foods, you'll even get different terms used in different regions within a country itself. So when we're talking about food, we can reach a common understanding through communication of what everyone is talking about, but it can take time. And when you've got information about thousands of objects, let's say, and their characteristics that you need to share with someone effectively and efficiently, how do you do that? What do you do in that situation? We need a way to standardize. The same challenge exists when we talk about water industry assets and their data. We call assets and their characteristics different things in industry across the supply chain. And that's often necessary. We all have our own way of describing our assets in our systems, born out of different needs. But we need to be able to exchange data about those assets at a large scale. On the slide, you can see an example of different terms perhaps used to describe a gate valve by different parties. But to exchange information about that gate valve without a common standard, the only way you can exchange data is by doing it manually. Doing it manually is represented on the slide with those figures passing a baton like a relay race. Whenever you watch a relay race at the Olympics, how often does that baton exchange not go so well? Probably more often than you'd like. So we need a common standard way to exchange data, ideally enabling us to automate how data goes from a system at the manufacturer end of the supply chain all the way through to the other end into the asset owner systems. So on the slide, I've represented in the red dashed boxes a common classification code. If we've got agreed common classifications, common properties that allow us to exchange data effectively, accurately, and efficiently, then we're really going to be benefiting in the industry. So if we have this standard approach to exchange of data, as I say, everyone will benefit. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see asset owners, they need quality, consistent, and timely data to manage their assets. A standard can help them do that. They also need a standard to help them specify their detailed asset requirements, asset information requirements, I should say. In the middle, suppliers need data to support asset construction and delivery, and having a standard will enable them to implement effective processes for collating the data required on a project and also delivering it through to client asset owners to meet their needs. And manufacturers will benefit from a standard as they only have to provide data in a single standard way, rather than in different ways for different clients in the industry. And as Jamie has alluded to, that those manufacturers who can provide data in a standardized format, they'll increase their potential to have their products specified by the supply chain. So to solve that challenge of standard data exchange, we formed the Standard Libraries Group, and you can see the mission of the group on the slide, but it's really effectively what I've just talked about, creating and implementing a standard way to exchange data about water industry products. Crucially, the work we do is designed to align to the two ISO standards you can see listed on the slide, so 23386 and 23387. So as closely as possible where we can in the group, we're aligning what we're developing in terms of our processes to developed standards. So at a high level, one of the key outputs of the group is the development of our product data templates or PDTs. That's what we've developed for the UK water industry to describe and exchange product data. And on the left-hand side, you can see an example extract from a PDT. The one that's shown is for a gate valve. And for every PDT we produce, there's a uniclass code on it. So these are really, really important to us. Jamie talked about it earlier. They're a common classification for that product type. You can see that's the box kind of highlighted in red under where it says classification code. It's a code to describe universally what that product is. Then for each product, we've got an agreed set of properties, which are the standardized way of describing all the characteristics of that product. I've highlighted one as product range. So another term for product range might be product series, but by standardizing on our PDTs, product range will always be product range, and people will know how to describe and utilize that property to exchange data and so on. So the products that we create PDTs for and the properties we include on the PDTs, that's what's been identified as required by the UK water industry from the representatives that sit on the Standard Libraries Group. And just to kind of demonstrate at a high level how that data will be exchanged using a PDT, you can see on this slide again, we've got the gate valve PDT shown. Under the value column in the middle, everything's currently blank. And at this point in time, it's product data template. It's just a template for data. If a valve manufacturer has been asked to complete a PDT to provide data about one of their products they're supplying, they pick up that PDT and then they complete the product specific sections of the PDT as shown on the slide. Now that PDT has become a product data sheet or a PDS. So it's not a template anymore. Its data has been populated onto it about a specific model of valve. Now that manufacturer can send that back to one client or multiple clients, depending on how many people are buying that valve. But we've also included on our PDT, our templates, a mechanism for capturing asset-specific data, so data specific to a particular instance of a valve or pump in the real world. So once that's populated by a supplier, as you can see on the slide, the person on the ground who's actually installing the asset, that PDS then becomes an asset data sheet. And that it's then complete. So it can be absorbed then into the asset owner's asset management system, and they've got everything they need to know about that product. And that's kind of how our PDTs are designed to work at a basic process level. So that's our process and standard. Our portfolio of PDTs is published and available online for the whole UK water industry under the BIM4Water area on the British Water website. You do now need to register for access to the website, but you should be able to register and get access to the PDTs. We've got new ones in development currently, which are going to be published soon, and they're all currently published in spreadsheet format as it's universally usable. But we are looking to move towards more flexible digital formats that are machine readable and have a data-driven approach to properties and classifications to take this work to the next level. So then looking ahead, we want to be at a point where we have a PDT for every water industry product that we feel requires one. And we want to drive and implement this standard in the UK, so it's been adopted by all companies in the UK water industry. So then related to that, Alex is shortly going to demonstrate a case study of how PDTs are being implemented in the Anglian Water Strategic Pipeline Alliance. But I just finally wanted to just touch on some of the organisations that have been represented on our wider standard libraries group. At the top left, you can see the water and water recycling companies that are involved. And I wanted to give you a quick bit of context to the size of the companies. The larger organisations on there, they'll be serving, several million customers, several million households, sometimes covering areas up to 20% of the UK, just to give you an indication of the scale that this standard we're looking to implement across. So with that said, many thanks for listening. I'm now going to hand over to Alex, who's going to talk about the practical implementation of PDTs in a case study.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining this webinar. I'm going to talk about an application of product data templates in a large-scale water sector project. So my name is Alex Giokas, and I'm representing the Strategic Pipeline Alliance, which is an alliance formed by Anglian Water to increase the water supply resilience in the whole region. So the program involves design and build about 300 kilometers of trunk main. It involves pumping stations, service reservoirs, valving arrangements, and construction has already begun and is due for 2025. So I would like to structure the presentation around a problem statement. We have all seen in the construction sector information missing or information not being in the right format, the way we want it. So this creates problems, both in designing new assets and also in maintaining the existing assets, because it's very difficult to retrospectively build information which was not collected at the right point in time and in the right format. So I would like to share some early stories from SPA, the Strategic Pipeline Alliance, which attempt resolving that problem. So story number one is about developing the asset information requirements, which is the what. What is needed in order to operate an asset, and how we engage with the relevant stakeholders to develop those asset information requirements. Story number two is about the how we collect the data and how we log the data in a common data platform and in a consistent format. So story number one about the asset information requirements. In SPA and Anglian Water, we are asking ourselves 5 basic questions about the definitions of a product and an asset. So Richard mentioned the example of a gate valve. We can have also steel pipe, plastic pipe, storage tanks, whatever. So it is important to differentiate what is product, what is asset. Product is something we procure from a manufacturer and they produce it. By the time it gets on site and gets installed, this is where the discussion about asset begins, because it starts serving a function. The initial product is now part of a wider system, and that system is part of another system of systems, so it serves a function. For instance, a valve may be a non-return valve, an isolating valve, that is a function. So we want to use product and asset data to describe in detail the product and the asset. And in order to do that, we need to engage a number of people from the whole life cycle, like manufacturers, designers, installers, site, asset operators, etc., etc. So we are undertaking at the moment this exercise in SPA, and we are trying to break down the assets in components so as to understand the functions of each component. For instance, here you can see the service reservoir process block, which has the main body in the middle, the inflow arrangement, the outflow arrangement. And we have identified all the components which serve functions, and then for those components, the applicable equipment which serves that function. For all those products, we have then organized the information required, and we have listed out the data validation rules which accompany those attributes and the systems which will host those attributes. And all of this is also associated with the Uniclass coding system, which Richard mentioned before. It is visible on the right-hand side of this table, where it is the Uniclass code for each attribute. So that was story number one about the what, the asset information requirements. The story number two is about the how we log in data in a common data platform and in a consistent format. I would like to emphasize that that a template can be in any format the organization is comfortable with. The key is to ensure consistency, and data validation rules are in place to ensure that consistency. So here we've got an example from steel pipe product we are now using in SPA. On the right-hand side, it is a screenshot from our common data platform, where we have engaged with a pipe supplier to log in data in a pre-built template. And why do we do this? Because when the product arrives on site, all that wealth of information is already existing in our common data platform. And then we scan the barcode which sits on the top of each product, and we match the physical asset on the ground with the digital instance in the cloud. And this is quite important because if you think of it, the information is growing gradually. The supplier in the first place, the manufacturer in the first place has provided a number of product data, and then we pass over to the site teams who undertake condition assessments, the commissioning arrangements, etc. And what they do is they take down notes, they take pictures. So we are engaging with them, and we have provided them with the tools to do this in a common data environment where everything is linked with an asset ID. And it is all growing and maturing through the course of the life cycle. So that was it. Thank you very much. I would like to emphasize again the importance of data validation rules. It is not product data and templates. It's about properties and values and ensuring consistency when filling data here and there across the life cycle. So over to you, Gigi, for the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. This was very, very fascinating. Great presentations from all of you. And I think very nice flow so that people can start to get an understanding of what a PDT is and how a PDT is used in a water utility as well as from a manufacturer. So I'll just start it off. I'm hoping we can get a lot of questions from the audience. I would like to ask for the utilities on the panel right now, how difficult was it? What were some of the biggest challenges that you all faced when you started to introduce PDTs? For example, if a utility in the US or somewhere around the world is listening to this and they want to introduce PDTs, one, where do they get started? And two, what are some of the challenges that they need to be aware of so that they don't, reinvent the wheel, if you will? So with that, how about if we go to Danielle? Can you give us a Welsh perspective first?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing is to have an open mind. A number of companies get really hung up on, our SAP systems not having the same sort of layers or coding and so on. So the biggest thing really is to have an open mind. As Richard said, things are going to be different. You're going to have your chips, you're going to have your fries. The idea is to actually work towards, okay, well, we can call them that in our system still, but let's have, a unique identity or an identity to describe what that is in a standard way so that we can still relate our chips and our fries, but we've got like a common word for that really. So I would say that that was one of probably the biggest parts, I think, was for some people to understand that, you know, we do name things differently, but that can still work. And to come to a consensus really on then obviously the uniclass definition for stating, you know, what a particular asset is and so on, and talking to one another regularly, and, you know, being open about your systems and so on as well. So for me, that was once that clicked, and to be honest, I was pretty quick within the water sector. We're all very collaborative. It was fine. But, you know, you do get hung up on those terminologies.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So if I understand you correctly, you know, you do put together a mapping of the different naming systems. And as long as everyone agrees that this is a mapping, things will start to proceed ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add from your perspective as well?
Yeah, from my perspective, adoption has been difficult, and it will be challenging for some. As Danielle alludes to, there is a lot of unknowns, and that I don't want to say scared, it's sort of the wrong word to use, but there's that reluctance to sort of be open and welcome this. Companies have spent a lot of time developing their own data connections and how they connect with data of assets and how that is gathered, and a lot of time and effort's gone into that. But now for us in the UK as BIM4Water, we're coming along to challenge that and to provide a unique template for the whole of the water industry to adopt, and that is one of the core concepts that needs to be taken on board for adoption.
Excellent. And just to follow up very quickly, I just want to ask, if a utility is listening to this and they want to start to introduce the concept of PDTs, is it something they should start thinking about when they're replacing something or when they're getting ready to expand their utility? Can anyone explain what is the best starting point for introducing PDTs? Alex, why don't you take this one?
So I think the most important point is to first start with the definition of asset information requirements, which is what you need as an organization to operate your assets. And this will open all the rest around the data structures and the format you need for those data.
Okay. Sounds good. And we have a question from Agnes, is how you made, have you made PDT, for example, for SUDS elements, and how much of the assets should be standardized? I mean, are we talking about every nut and bolt that goes into water infrastructure, or are you prioritizing on some of the more, the larger elements or the more functional elements? Let's go to Karen. Do you have a feel for some of that?
I think if you take the first question, I think you've got to start small based on what is most important to you. So you can't start, you know, it becomes such an enormous task if you don't focus on some things and begin to make it work. So I know with the work that we've been doing at the Environment Agency, starting, thinking about that information that you need, thinking, because you may not, as a business, you may not want that information yet.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing what you do and what you don't, because I think that's as important at this stage in the development, rather than perhaps consuming lots of data you can't do anything with. So it's really sort of mapping what you have at the moment with what's in the PDTs, and then procuring that through your supply chain partners.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Gigi?
Yes.
So, for example, the organisation I work for, we just look at maintainable assets. So anything that requires a maintenance input, whereas some companies might look a bit beyond that and a bit further. Or some companies might consolidate their assets into arguably like a pump set. So it doesn't just include the pump, it includes the valve. And then you'll have multiple PDTs for that pump set, for example.
Okay, that's excellent. I mean, that's actually, Raphael asked the question, does it make sense to create a PDT for building products that are not considered to be an asset, like a pipe fitting, a pipe segment, or pipe support even? So how do you go about determining what you just said, Johnson? How do you go about determining which ones you really need to focus on? Just the ones that are maintainable, or the ones that are even connected to the maintainable parts?
Again, it's what your information requirements are. Like, how big is your asset data model going to be for your business, and what is relevant to you, essentially.
Okay. And Richard, would you like to give us your experience on that? How did you go about deciding what is relevant? You know, did you come together in meetings as across different departments to make that decision, or was it an operational decision? How does a utility really go about making that distinctions when you need PDT, when you do not need PDT?
So it's a really good question. So within the group, the ethos of how we create PDTs has kind of been based around our capital programs. So when we're building particular types of assets in the industry, that's kind of highlighted to us when there's a priority to create sort of a PDT in any given situation. So if a particular water company is looking to install a number of particular type of pump, then that's a good instance within the standard libraries group for us then to say, okay, we need to create a PDT for that type of pump based on need. And I think, as Karen highlighted before, generally speaking, the PDTs we've developed to date in the industry are kind of for the big ticket items that we install a lot of, and that are specific to the water industry as well. So our specific types of pumps, our specific types of instruments, our specific type of valves, that's the stuff that's kind of we have a high volume of that we use in the industry. And that's kind of organically, they've been the ones we've basically created over time. So now we've kind of got to that point of having that, I guess, approach organically originally. Now we're trying to understand, okay, from the PDTs we've created in the industry, the pumps we've got, the valves we've got, what gaps have we got in terms of which valves have we not created PDTs for, which pumps have we not created PDTs for, that we're then starting to look at to then create a bit of a program to kind of complete each asset type that we need PDTs for. And I think as part of those discussions, we are currently now looking at whether there's some particular asset types we don't need PDTs for, because in the industry we use a lot of really, not to get too technical, but we use a lot of really small ball valves on some of our sites for like chemical dose and things like that. But they're pretty small, and they're pretty much an off-the-shelf kind of thing that we don't really need to do a PDT for, because it's not the kind of thing we'd be managing a lot of data for compared to, like, you know, a big industrial size valve. So that's kind of how we've approached it, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's excellent. I think another follow-up question, or maybe the discussion can go into this direction now. So a PDT is about structuring data that represents that particular asset. And part of that data set comes from the manufacturer, and it really kind of describes that, that product. How do we incentivize more and more manufacturers to provide the data in the PDT in an automated way, for example? Jamie, do you want to take that as one of the vendors on the panelists?
Yeah, we can do. So I think just back to Rafael's question as well, you know, what's the need for different PDTs? Is it such a small asset? And Jonathan says, you know, looking at large utilities, when, you know, something goes bang in the middle of the night, what is their maintainable assets? But really, a data template to me is just a set of questions. And for a manufacturer to do well moving forward, you want to be able to answer the questions, so whatever they might be. And let me give you a really simple example, right? So I'm shopping for a cooker the other day, and all I wanted to know was the depth. I'm on Amazon, and I want to know the depth of the cooker, so I make sure the thing fits. But if the manufacturer's not got that information, click, I'm gone. And being able to answer the questions as a manufacturer is going to help people make better informed decisions, and, you know, help them construct, and of course asset management. And I think, you know, boiling that down, and we're looking at, you know, do we require a PDT for this manageable asset? My advice to any manufacturer would be, don't try and second guess what the questions are going to be in the future. Try and make your back end systems as smart and as intelligent as possible, so you can answer any question that goes, you know, comes forward. And yeah, the incentive for a manufacturer in saying that is if you want to do better business, right? If you help customers make decisions about your products, don't make yourself hard to do business with.
Oh, excellent. That's a perfect way of presenting it. Now that we are thinking about having all these discrete data sets, you know, we can then, I think one of the questions from Agnes is, do you then merge these PDTs with different objectives? In other words, now you have quite a bit of data. You know, it's not just about, like Jamie was saying, dimensions and things like that, but we're also looking into cost structures. We're looking into sustainability, the carbon footprint. We're looking into energy. These are different data points that you're going to be collecting for some of these assets. So now, how are these data sets being utilized in different ways with different objectives within a utility? You know, why don't we, Danielle, what are your thoughts on that? And then maybe we can go to Richard.
Absolutely. So I'll give a very simple and you know, an actual example really from Welsh Water. Kilowatt hours for pumps is something that our energy team needs. Getting that information from capital departments has been piecemeal and quite difficult. What PDTs do is basically gives that information up front, even in the sort of detailed design stage, rather than the actual you know, build and commissioning stage of a project, so that the energy team can actually see, you know, what the energy usage is going to be, you know, for that site and how it's going to change, which then also links into you know, lots of different things, especially, you know, going forward as well, things like carbon. So as Richard said, you know, looking to implement or add in information such as carbon as well. The carbon calculation is really key, but there's a number of different objectives, and having a PDT and having a standardized format then means that we can start to take this information and pass it out to different parts of the business. So it makes everything a lot slicker in terms of the information flow, and also then pushes that need for increased automation because of the benefits that will bring. I hope that helps a little bit.
Oh, no, absolutely. Richard, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think Danielle explained it really well. I think I'll just kind of reiterate really, I guess in terms of the objectives of the PDTs, they're really a vehicle for delivering what everyone on the supply chain needs effectively. So if we talk about the owner operators, I think Alex mentioned kind of everything stemming from an asset owner's information requirements, and that's really the starting point for each company to define what it needs. And obviously we've got a lot of these companies in the UK around the table that are part of the Standard Libraries Group, so if they're developing common requirements that we identify that the PDTs need to deliver, we can ensure they're incorporated into the PDTs. But then the data in the PDTs itself is really then the water companies, particularly if we start to deliver machine readable PDTs, it's really then they've got the flexibility to take that data on board and then deliver it to whichever area of the business needs that information, whatever systems they hold some of this data in. Like in Anglian Water, we use SAP for a lot of our asset management data, but it might be different in other companies. And I think by making our PDTs machine readable in the future, that's going to allow that flexibility to deliver it into different systems in an automated way for the end user to get the best out of the data. If I've kind of understood and kind of answered the question the right way.
No, that's excellent. That's perfect. And I agree. And Jonathan, let me ask you this: is as we start to collect these properties and these values, even if they don't exist now, can you imagine in the future there's going to be more and more digital applications that will make use of some of this data that is being filled out in these PDTs for the different assets?
Yeah, definitely. Just going back to what Danielle said, like embodied carbon for projects, like we can start making decisions on, do we build that based on the carbon footprint that we're going to produce? There's lots of multiple things that we can look at. We could start bringing this into sort of start manipulating AI to make smarter networks and things like that as well. There's a lot of data and a lot of information that we can use, and ultimately just understand what we have as businesses, as utilities, and understand what we can do with that. It can become very powerful.
No, that's perfect. And Kieran, from your perspective as an environmental agency, how do you go about thinking about some of the new or the kind of information that's going to be very useful from an environmental perspective?
I mean, this is quite an interesting one, because I think we're at the cusp of doing things very, very differently. And I think most organisations have been very tied with what they've always done and how they've done it. And we really now need to, this is providing us a means to begin to automate, begin to standardise, and then by doing that, you can begin to automate and start doing things differently. And most importantly, start answering different questions that previously were very, very difficult to answer.
Yes.
It's a bit of a long-winded question, but I think this is, you know, it's digitization is not something that happens without lots of effort and lots of activities that need to run to allow you to do that. And PDTs is a very key way of being able to identify the data that you need, but also a way of extending that in time.
Yes. Yeah. And we have another question here from Martin. Do the unit class tables provided by NBS help define the level of asset detail for a PDS? Let's see, Alex, would you like to try to decipher this question and answer it?
It definitely helps. It definitely helps, because if you think of it, the asset information requirements need to be structured in layers of detail. So the unit class classification system helps getting from the highest level to a lowest level of detail. For instance, when you got a gate valve, this is a valve. A valve is can be classified in one system above that. And then all of those assets are part of a water business unit. So the unit class system can help doing that classification. But I would like to emphasize that this may be different depending on the organizational needs. It doesn't need to be exactly the same in every organization.
Okay, excellent. And now let's just step back a little bit, because, you know, we see that the UK, due to a mandate, as you guys described in 2011, that, you know, city infrastructure is going to be using BIM. How do we make PDTs a standard outside of the UK, or or is there another entity that's similar for, you know, to BIM4Water that exists in the US, for example, or is there something similar to that in Asia? I did hear one of the speakers talk about collaboration with Australia. Is there something else that we can look to or help organize from, let's say, a US perspective? Jamie, since you're the chair of the BIM4Water, maybe you have some insights on this.
Yeah, thanks, Gigi. I think there's always lessons to be learned, and, you know, it's never good practice to keep reinventing the wheel. But, you know, I'm not saying that all of the questions, should we call it, the properties and property groups that we require for, say, product data templates in the UK are going to be the same, you know, and they're not going to be the same globally. But, you know, what I'd advise is look at being a relevant authority. If it's, you know, what we've done here in the UK with the water utilities we've got together, that's the relevant authority as described in ISO 23387. And, you know, these are the experts that are really setting out and defining what property groups and properties are required to, you know, maintain and look after the assets. And of course, the supply chain, as, you know, Richard mentioned there, when the data template goes through that review process, or the stakeholders. So I don't know if that's a roundabout way of answering the question, but I think it's more about the process of defining properties for data templates and getting that right for an individual industry.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like whatever the UK is coming up with should be relevant globally, because we all are dealing with similar infrastructures around the world. So I think we should, maybe the rest of the world should take advantage of what the leadership that the UK has shown in this area. I want to go back now, because one of the things that digitization, PDTs, a more understanding of assets across the different phases of infrastructure, from the design phase, construction to operation. again, are you finding in your own utilities, Jonathan, maybe you want to take this one first. Are you finding in your own utilities that this has really brought more and more departments together, because there's so many stakeholders, if you will, inside the utility, not just outside? There's even more stakeholders outside, but how are you working through the interdepartmental collaboration on these PDTs? Because you have like the supply, I mean, you have the business side, the operations side, the engineering side, field workers. How are you all coming together so that you can have this structured form of asset information?
Yeah, I think if we sort of ignore the process of building the asset and getting the asset into position to actually have this PDT to develop into a asset data sheet, then if we're looking at the connection across like asset management, capital delivery and operations, that's definitely happening, and the dots are connected, but the dots are starting to connect now with the regulators as well, and having a mandate on asset management systems across the water industry as well. And just sort of going back to your question you asked Jamie as well, there's a lot of industries that we can look at as well, like particularly within oil and gas and the building services industry, that they've laid some really good foundations around BIM like BIM solutions. And you can just see the dots connecting, and they're just going to continue to connect, and potentially there could be some cross connection somewhere across other industries as well. But I don't think that's now. I think that's something that will develop in the future, but this will be something that continues to grow and continues to connect. Excellent.
And Danielle, just to further describe a PDT, we talked about a PDT as having a set of properties that come from the PDS. The PDS is a product data sheet that comes from the manufacturer. Then there are life cycle type of added properties. Is this something, things like when it was purchased, when it was installed, commissioned, and maybe even well into operation? Is that part of the PDT, is that as standardized as the manufacturer set of properties in your experience?
Within Welsh Water, yes. But I agree that probably we could do more to standardize that as like a next step on from the PDTs. So that information, again, it does come down to the information requirements effectively. So you've got your asset information requirements, which I think is where the PDTs really sort of sit, in getting that key asset information from the manufacturers to go into your asset management systems. And then there's the other layer, which is obviously your project information. So your project information will differ from your asset information. I think that's where the commissioning and the time of install and your warranty periods and so on, information like that is defined. So it's all under the umbrella of ISO 19650. And I think that, as Alex said, asset information requirements, I completely agree with Alex. It is the critical starting point, defining what you need, when you need it, how to transfer that or exchange that information. Obviously, the PDT is a big part of that. And then obviously growing then into project information requirements. But the key is the asset information requirements, which I feel is what the PDT really helps, is that exchange of information from the manufacturer to the asset owner, in line with the asset information requirements.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's see, Richard, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I guess it kind of alludes a little bit to what Alex was talking about. The asset, sort of the ADS part of the PDTs is probably the trickier bit to completely standardize in terms of how it works across the industry, because that's the bit when I talked about how we want to get to a place of how we automate data against how we have to, I guess, historically people have had to manually kind of take data from data sheets and enter it into systems. That asset specific data is always probably going to have some element of manual entry to it in terms of how the data is completed and entered into the sheets, because someone on the ground is probably going to have to capture it into a system. Now, I think it really depends on who's using the PDTs and capturing that asset specific data. It probably depends on the level of digital maturity of your organization in terms of how well you can standardize that, because some companies might have some fancy sort of technology to kind of capture those bits of data for them on site, whereas other people might have to do it manually, using a spreadsheet or something like that. So I think that's probably the part of our PDTs where we have got that asset data part at the bottom, where it's probably difficult to standardize in the same way as it would be for the model specific stuff that would come from the manufacturer. But I think within the industry, we're starting to see, with what Alex demonstrated, different ways that people are kind of incorporating that into their processes. That I think as BIM4Water, we can start to share that learning and share that knowledge with people, so that we can say this is how you can, facilitate this part of your process and stuff like that. And I think that's probably when we start to see more examples like that, we can start to do. Martin, who I think is on the call today, we have got some case studies in the industry we published through BIM4Water as well, to identify to people this is how this company are doing this, that you can take learning from. So we can certainly share the best practices that we've seen in the industry for things like the asset data part of the PDTs, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we only have a couple of minutes left, and what I'd like to do is, again, the way this whole webinar started is because we do have in the Digital Twin Working Group in the SWAN organization a sub-working group really focused on BIM and asset management. And I think and Jamie, as I said, is a co-lead for that. And as we started working on process blocks, we kind of took a step back and wanted to do this webinar. I think it will be very helpful. And if we don't get to the questions, we see a few more coming in. If we don't get to questions, we'll definitely follow up and make sure that we answer every single question that came in. But let's take this opportunity to maybe, JB, if you don't mind, just kind of giving us your vision of where you would like to see the SWAN Digital Twin sub-working group on BIM and asset management. Where are we going, and how can people contribute and help and move the whole sector forward? So Jamie, I give it to you.
Yeah, so I think, starting with when we signed the partnership between BIM4Water and SWAN is all about, being better together and sharing experiences. And of course, that led to the development of the BIM and asset management group. And, how does a product data feed into that? Alex hit the nail on the head. When you look at a product, you look at an asset, it's all about, a product doesn't have a function until you put it into a system. Then it's got a function, it's got a purpose, it's got a process. So, the work that we're doing in the BIM and asset management group is starting to focus in on what them functions and processes are. And then, of course, from that, once we identify what the standard and that, a standard function or process is, we can then start to prescribe what in discrete products need to go and build that system up. So, it's fantastic to have two groups working on the same agenda, but in different locations. It's quite warming. So
yeah, well, thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for your leadership. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for their insights. I think we've all learned quite a bit from all of you, and with your experience. And like I said, the UK is leading right now globally. I think we all have a lot to learn from you and add on to it. So if we can come together in groups like BIM4Water, the SWAN Digital Twin Working Group, and contribute and really move the sector as quickly as possible towards digital twin, towards taking advantage and leveraging things like product data templates, I think the faster our sector will improve efficiency and hopefully harness this very special resource that we all are very passionate about. With that, I'm going to give it to Shayna for any final words. Shayna?
Thank you so much, Gigi. Yeah, and thank you for all those presentations. I know that I personally learned a lot on my side, and I've just been sitting here taking notes. So really appreciate that. We will make sure to share the recording as well as these slides with everybody and answer a few of these Q&A questions that are still coming in. So thank you all for your time, and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're located.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for the panelists.